I think that those of you who use a sign system should pay attention to some of the criticisms that people who sign differently have provided us. You know, we're not shy about our vocal criticisms in this group. And one of those is that they feel that a language, ASL, has been altered. And it certainly has. I mean, people usually use the fact that systems are based on, let's just talk about the United States systems. The systems in the United States are based on American Sign Language, and that's usually said as a very positive thing. There the difference ends. And one of the first things I used to do with my consulting money is hire C2 interpreters so that I could have a visual representation when I spoke of C2, so that people could watch both languages and see that if you didn't grow up or you weren't taught C signing, why would you understand it? I mean, the signs are different. If you're not used to English syntax, very quickly you have difficulty in watching C. It's not like you would innately understand that language. You have to study it, just like the people in Plano know that are here. You have to learn those signs. So some of the things that people have rightly criticized about all the sign systems is that sometimes there's so many little pieces of information that it might create real strain on the eyes. You'll notice when you have a chance to look at it in more detail that curriculum modifications checklist that I showed you briefly part of has information on it about taking breaks and making sure that children do have breaks from watching interpreters and teachers of the deaf in the classroom. That's something that we do need to consider. Sometimes the conventions created in the system seem to overload the mind, can overload what the mind can process or break the rules of natural sign language. And really what they're referring to there, given that typo and all, is that sometimes the important information is on the non-dominant hand, and so when you sign you often don't really catch the vocabulary word perhaps because you're not looking for the information on the hand that it's on. And those kinds of things are certainly things we need to address. I remember when I used to teach, I don't teach any kind of sign systems anymore. We have other people in our program that do that. But when I did, I'd often have to show my hand shape first to like my 20 students. You know, I'd have to wave out the hand shape and then sign the sign to make sure that they knew whether that was talent or skill or whether it was bus or truck or, you know, one of those signs where the letter Q really makes a difference. So again, those aren't reasons to throw out the baby with the bathwater. They're not reasons to throw out the whole system. There's certainly things, though, that we need to talk about. In teaching in my program at the university, we have to because of the constituency that we work with, and philosophically it's not difficult for us to suggest that students have language goals written for both English and American Sign Language. Now it might not be that your program does that, but I'd like to just show that as an example of something that you might be thinking about. As I talk about the sign systems then, I'm going to use this Bloom and Leahy model of form, content, and use. Now this morning, Barbara Schirmer talked about Bloom's cognitive taxonomy, and that's a different Bloom. This is a model of language acquisition that you might be familiar with, and I have found it very helpful in explaining to all kinds of language sign users how these different languages and systems work. So basically any language has grammar, and it has meaning, and it has use. You might know these as syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. Sign systems I've already talked about, or some of the systems of communication I've already talked about, as well as some that I will talk about. You might think, first of all, well, which ones of those are really focused on grammar? And cued speech would fall there, and C1 or MSS, and C2. and then which ones were really never invented or used with the goal of encoding English. They're used to focus on meaning, and that would be signed English or pigeon signed English. Or in our part of the country, we have conceptually accurate signed English, and I've heard that used quite a bit at the conference, so I'm thinking you have that too. Just a note about this term. I really avoid using this term, and I would encourage your team to think about it also. First of all, English has accurate concepts, and so does ASL. So what this really means is conceptually ASL accurate signed English. And when people say, well, that's not conceptually accurate, it's conceptually accurate in English, the way, like C2 is completely conceptually accurate in English. I grew up with that kind of English. The concepts are in my head in that way. And for kids who grow up with C2, that's the way they conceptualize the language. What people really mean by this is it's conceptually accurate in American Sign Language or Pidgin Signed English. So I think this is just a confusing term, and one that might be best to just use Pidgin Signed English, or the current popular term is contact language. Just to make things worse, we change the terms every now and then. A little bit of research. We don't have a lot of research in our field, but I'm just going to whip through a little bit quickly.